The forest called us by name. Location: Blackwater Hollow, West Virginia. Approximate year: 1998. I am 61 years old now. For most of my adult life, I worked around things people would rather not remember. Car wrecks, domestic calls, bodies pulled from creeks, families waiting for someone who never came home. I spent 27 years in county law enforcement, and during that time, I learned that almost every frightening thing becomes less frightening once you understand what caused it. A sound in an empty house becomes loose plumbing. A light moving through the trees becomes a hunter. A missing person becomes a set of tracks, an accident, or a body in a place nobody thought to search. Almost everything leaves an explanation behind. What happened in Blackwater Hollow did not. It was October of 1998. I was 33 and working as a deputy in southern West Virginia. The coal mine outside Blackwater had closed 6 years earlier. Half the houses along the creek were empty, and weeds grew through the gravel where the old railroad branch had once carried coal out of the mountains. Beyond the last homes, the abandoned rail grade continued into the forest for almost 9 miles. The tracks were gone, but the raised bed remained, cutting through steep country where daylight disappeared early beneath hemlocks and poplars. The first call came shortly after 6 on a Thursday morning. A woman named June Hale reported that her older brother Curtis had vanished during the night. Curtis was 42. He had worked at the mine until it closed, then took whatever jobs he could find. Curtis and I had gone to school together. We were never close, but he had called me Danny since we were boys. He drank more than he should have, but he was not known for wandering off. His truck was still beside the house. His wallet and keys were inside. The back door stood open. June waited on the porch, wearing a man's coat over her nightgown. Before my partner, Mark Ellison, and I reached the steps, she said, "He went into the woods." I asked how she knew. She pointed behind the property. Beyond a patch of dead grass and a rusted fence, the forest rose toward the old railroad grade. Curtis's dog was tied near the shed. It normally barked at everyone. That morning, it lay flat against the ground, staring between the trees. June told us Curtis had been acting strangely for several days. He kept saying Eli was calling him, she said. Mark and I both knew the name. Eli Hale was Curtis's younger brother. He had disappeared in those mountains in 1987 while checking hunting traps before a snowstorm. Search crews found one glove near the abandoned rail bed. Nothing else. "Did you hear the voice?" I asked. June shook her head. "Was Curtis drinking?" "A little." That usually meant a lot. We searched the house. There was no sign of violence. Curtis's bed had not been used. His heavy jacket and one pair of boots were missing. Behind the fence, we found a single set of tracks leading uphill. None came back. By 8 o'clock, the volunteer fire department had joined us. The sheriff sent a tracking dog and handler. 2 forestry workers came because they knew the old grade. The weather made the search urgent. A cold front was expected after dark, with heavy rain and temperatures close to freezing. The dog took Curtis's scent from a shirt and led us toward the forest. For the first half-mile, the trail was clear. Curtis had crossed a utility cut, reached the abandoned rail bed, and turned east into the hollow. Near an old concrete drainage tunnel, the dog stopped. The tunnel passed beneath the grade and opened into a steep ravine. It was partly blocked by mud and branches. The dog lowered itself and began whining. Its handler, Vernon Cole, tried to lead it forward. The animal pulled backward so hard the collar nearly came over its head. We found no bear tracks, carcass, or anything else that explained the reaction. Vernon walked the dog around the tunnel. It recovered Curtis's scent on the far side, but from then on it kept looking behind us. Around 11, Mark and I moved ahead of the others. The grade curved along the mountain. We had stopped beside a broken branch when someone called my name. "Dan?" The voice came from uphill. I turned toward the slope. "Curtis?" After a pause, the voice answered, "Over here." Mark heard it too. We climbed through mountain laurel toward the sound. The slope was steep and covered with loose stone. We called Curtis's name every few yards, but he did not answer again. At the top, we reached a narrow shelf beneath sandstone cliffs. Nobody was there. No tracks, no broken brush, no place for a man to hide without being seen. Mark looked back toward the valley. Sound must have carried. That was possible. Voices travel strangely in steep country. Still, the voice had not shouted for help. It had called me by name. Shortly after noon, one of the forestry workers found a cigarette butt near a fallen oak. The paper was still dry beneath the damp leaves, and Curtis smoked the same brand. Nearby was a boot print matching those behind his house. The trail left the railroad grade and followed an old logging path south. We divided into smaller groups. Mark, Vernon, the dog, and I took the logging trail. The farther we went, the quieter the forest became. There was almost no wind, but we kept hearing branches shifting above us. Each time we stopped, the sound stopped too. The dog began turning around every few yards. Vernon said, "Ranger thinks somebody is following us." Mark forced a laugh. "Maybe Curtis is." Nobody answered. At 2 in the afternoon, we reached the remains of an old railroad work camp. Only concrete footings, rusted cable, and a collapsed shed remained. Curtis's trail passed directly through it. We found another cigarette butt beside a concrete block. In the dirt, someone had scratched one word with a stick, ELI. The letters were large and uneven. The dog followed the scent 20 yards beyond the camp. Then it stopped. Not weakened, not confused. Stopped. Ranger circled with his nose against the leaves, but could not recover the trail. It was as though Curtis had reached that point and disappeared. We searched until late afternoon and found nothing else. At the command post, more volunteers had arrived. The rescue squad had set up lights beside the road. The sheriff wanted to suspend the deeper search after dark, but the temperature was falling faster than predicted. If Curtis was injured, waiting until morning might kill him. We agreed to continue along marked trails until midnight. That was when I first spoke with Emmett Rusk. Emmett was 68 and had spent most of his life underground. He had served on the mine rescue team and still volunteered whenever someone went missing. He asked where we had lost the trail. "The old work camp near Briar Fork," I said. His expression changed. "Did you hear anything out there?" I told him about the voice on the hillside. Emmett looked toward the mountains. "Did you see who called you?" "No." "Then you didn't hear a person." Mark smiled, but Emmett did not. He said people around Blackwater had stories about voices in the mountains. Miners heard their names from sealed tunnels. Hunters heard relatives calling from the wrong side of a ridge. Parents heard children crying beyond the tree line while those children were safe at home. I asked whether he believed those stories. He answered with another question. "You remember the search for Eli Hale?" "Of course I did." Two men heard Eli calling from opposite sides of the same hollow, Emmett said. His father heard both voices. One was asking for help, the other was laughing. Before I could ask more, the sheriff called us over. A search team had found a strip of orange fabric almost 2 miles south of the rail grade. June confirmed that Curtis's jacket had orange lining. We organized one final search of the southern trail. Our group consisted of Mark, a firefighter named Aaron Boyd, and me. Vernon tried to bring Ranger, but the dog crawled beneath his truck and growled whenever anyone pulled the leash toward the forest. We went without him. Karen Pike, captain of the rescue squad, remained at the command post with Emmett. They had the trauma bag, folding litter, spare lights, and the strongest radio. We entered the forest shortly after 7. Mist gathered among the trees, turning our flashlight beams white. We reached the old camp, then followed reflective tape toward the place where the fabric had been found. A few minutes later, we found Curtis's jacket hanging from the fork of a young tree. The zipper was open. One side of the lining had been torn. There was no blood. Below it, boot prints continued south. We followed them into a shallow hollow where an old bridge had once crossed a creek. Curtis's prints led beneath one of the stone supports. There they crossed and doubled back as though he had walked in circles. Then they vanished among the rocks. We spread out, but remained within sight of one another. "Curtis!" Mark shouted. His voice faded through the hollow. A moment later, someone answered downstream. "Help me!" The voice was weak, but clear. Mark immediately moved toward it. Aaron and I followed. "Keep talking," I called. "Help me." We pushed through brush along the creek. "I broke my leg," the voice said. Then the same sentence came from behind us. "I broke my leg." We stopped. It was not a similar voice. It was identical. The same strained breath, the same pause, the same crack on the final word. Mark turned slowly. That came from the bridge. The voice downstream repeated, "I broke my leg." Then the voice behind us repeated it again. Aaron raised his flashlight toward the trees. "What the hell is this?" I called the command post on the radio. Only static answered. Then the voice ahead changed. "Dan?" It sounded like Curtis, not a stranger. "Curtis!" "Dan, come down here," Mark whispered. "Don't answer it." A branch cracked uphill. All three of us turned our lights toward it. Nothing moved. Then Karen Pike's voice called from somewhere across the creek. "Dan, bring the litter." That was impossible. Karen was nearly 2 miles away. Her voice came again, perfect, down to the rasp from years of smoking. "We found him." I tried the radio once more. "Command, this is Mercer. Respond." Through the static, the real Karen answered. "Mercer, return to command. Storm moving in. All teams return." At the same moment, Karen's voice in the woods said, "Dan, don't listen to that." For several seconds, none of us moved. Then I said, "We're leaving." We stayed together and retraced our route. The voices followed. Curtis called for help from behind us. Karen ordered us to stop from the slope above. Once, Aaron's voice came from somewhere ahead, even though Aaron was walking beside me. "Mark went the wrong way," it said. None of us answered. After that, the voices became quieter. They did not sound angry. They sounded patient. About half a mile from the command post, my radio was still giving us nothing but static. We kept moving through the southern woods, following our own reflective markers back toward the road. While we were making our way back, Karen and Emmett heard my voice from the trees north of the road. Karen told me the sequence later, and Emmett confirmed every detail. "We found him!" the voice shouted. "Bring the litter and the lights." Karen immediately grabbed the trauma bag. Emmett took the folded litter and a battery lantern. They crossed the road and reached the northern tree line. My voice called again. "Quickly! He's still alive!" Karen stepped between the first trees while Emmett followed with the litter. The voice moved farther into the darkness. "Straight ahead!" At that exact moment, the command radio crackled behind them. My real voice came through the speaker. "Command, this is Mercer. We're approaching from the south, 2 minutes out." Karen stopped. My voice came again from directly ahead of her. "Don't listen to that. Come here." She began backing toward the road. Then footsteps approached from the southern trail. Karen turned. Mark, Aaron, and I emerged from the trees and crossed the road toward the vehicles. Our clothes were wet. Mark carried Curtis's jacket. I held the radio in my hand. Karen stared at me. I asked why she was standing at the tree line with the trauma bag. Before she could answer, my voice came from the darkness behind her. "Don't stand there." Everyone froze. The voice was mine, not close to mine. Mine. It had my accent, my rhythm, even the roughness in my throat after hours of shouting. "Come here," it said. Karen began backing toward the road. The voice continued. "Only the two of you." Emmett dropped one end of the litter. It struck a rock with a metallic crack. For a moment, the forest was silent. Then the thing spoke in Curtis Hale's voice. "Danny." Only a few people still called me that. Curtis was one of them. "Don't leave me out here." Mark reached Karen and pulled her onto the road. We turned the vehicles so their headlights faced the forest. The beams illuminated wet trunks, low branches, and drifting mist. Nothing stood there, no person, no animal. Then my voice came from farther uphill. "Karen?" A few seconds later, Curtis's voice came from the opposite side of the road. "Emmett." The two voices alternated, mine from the north, Curtis's from the south. Neither shouted. They spoke as though standing only yards away. We stayed beside the vehicles with the engines running and did not answer. After several minutes, the words stopped. Something began moving through the woods around us. Branches bent, leaves shifted. The sound passed behind the vehicles and emerged on the other side. It seemed too heavy to be a person and too deliberate to be an animal. It never entered the light. When the sheriff and the other search teams returned to the command post, the movement stopped. The night search was suspended. At sunrise, we searched the northern tree line. There were no tracks except those left by Karen and Emmett. No footprints leading away from the place where the voice had called them. No sign that another person had been there. 2 search dogs refused to work near the road. For 3 more days, we searched Briar Fork and the abandoned railroad grade. We found Curtis's jacket, the cigarette butts, and the word ELI scratched into the dirt. Nothing else. Curtis Hale was never found. The official report said he entered the forest while intoxicated and probably suffered an accident in difficult terrain. That remains possible. Those mountains contain cliffs, abandoned mine openings, and ravines deep enough to hide a body for decades. But it does not explain the voices. It does not explain how something north of the road used my voice while I was returning from the south. And it does not explain why it asked Karen and Emmett to come alone. Several weeks later, I visited Emmett at his house. I asked why he had hesitated before entering the woods. He sat quietly for a long time, then said, "The woods never ask you to come out. They always ask you to come farther in." During the search for Eli in 1987, Emmett had heard his dead wife calling from a ravine. He had not followed. Another volunteer heard his daughter crying and did. That man was found the next morning nearly 4 miles away, barefoot and unable to explain how he had crossed the mountain. His daughter lived in Ohio. Emmett told me the old miners followed one rule. If someone called from darkness, you made them step into the light before you moved toward them. You did not trust a voice. You trusted a face. I never included that conversation in my report. At 33, I cared too much about how it would sound. At 61, I care less. Karen left the rescue squad the following spring. Mark transferred to another county. Aaron stopped volunteering for wilderness searches. Emmett died in 2004. Curtis and Eli Hale are still listed as missing. The old railroad grade is almost completely overgrown now. Floods washed out the access road, and the county eventually placed gates across the entrance. I moved away from Blackwater years ago. I live in a neighborhood with streetlights and houses on both sides. Even so, I never answer someone calling from a place I cannot see. Sometimes my grandchildren hide near the fence and shout for me to find them. I always make them step into view first. They think it is part of the game. I let them think that, because what I remember most clearly from that night is not Curtis's empty jacket. It is not Karen standing at the tree line. It is not the movement circling beyond the headlights. It is the calmness of my own voice coming from those woods. It did not sound angry. It did not sound hungry. It sounded helpful. It sounded exactly like a man trying to save someone's life. And that is why I believe Curtis followed it. Whatever lived in Blackwater Hollow did not chase people. It did not need to. It waited until it found the right voice. Then it called them by name. That was the third story from the 5th collection. Stay tuned to Mystic Wild to be continued.